So we welcome all from whichever time zone you are in. Have a good day and hope this session brings a lot of value to your learning journey as it has been for us all in organizing these events and hoping that the sharing by our highly selected speakers starting from this session today will be very useful for you. Okay. Uh, my name is Sanjay Swaroop. I'm a professor here at NUS in the Department of Biological Sciences and also with NUS Environmental Research Institute or NERI. Uh, I also have been associated with today's speaker and also speaker for tomorrow for several years now. So it's a great pleasure to me and for me to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Pavagadhi Shruti, or Shruti in short. She is a graduate PhD from the National University of Singapore, from our university, from the Environmental Sciences Division in the engineering faculty. She has her undergrad training and previous formal training in the field of nutrition. So she brings the field of food science and nutrition now into food production and sustainable practices, bringing her expertise in environmental sciences into this rather into multidisciplinary domain. So she kind of brings and bridges these fields together. And that's the underpinning message that hopefully you will also see as I've been seeing from her work in the recent years. So without much ado, I welcome you all again and invite our today's speaker, Dr. Shruti, to address you.
Thank you, Prof, for this wholesome and flattering introduction. So I would ask if I can share my screen now. Okay.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
So while you are doing it, for our participants, at the end of this, we'll open up questions for the speaker. In the meantime, you can post your questions in the Q&A. We would prefer to have them in Q&A rather than the chat section. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any heads for everyone? Can see my screen, can hear me properly?
It's coming through properly, Shruti.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for, first of all, for providing me with this opportunity, this platform to start off, to kick off these webinar series that we've organized. And so today I'd be talking about an approach that we've adopted in some of our projects, and I'd be presenting glimpses of some of the case studies that we've done where we have developed sustainable solutions, or at least we are looking to develop some of these nature-based solutions for future food production. But before going on to the approach, I would take a backward way here. So I would first talk a little bit about future food production, and also why is there a need to develop sustainable solution, and what should be the elements of such solutions or framework that to be developed. So I would straight away go to the problem, the future food production. So here I would like to bring your attention to some of these global trends that we are seeing. Firstly, in terms of the way people are moving. So the statistics say that about over 60% of world's population would be looking at moving to urban centers by 2050, and especially there will be a migration from rural areas where currently they're all agriculture, the occupation is agriculture mainly, but they would be leaving that and they would be going and adopting and looking for better, let's say, job options in the urban centers. While this happens, the population will continue to grow. So we would have a population which would grow further, but then we would have less farmers now to grow the food for this population. So that's the double whammy that we are facing, and we are almost reaching, or we are that at that point already as we speak. And these two challenges are compounded further by climate change effects. And I don't think I need to talk a lot about climate change. All of us are now being even more familiar with these terms: climatic adversities, climatic climate change, emergence of new pathogens, pests and disease. I mean, I talk as we are going through this phase of pandemic, so everyone knows the importance of this. So while all this would keep going, we would still have to produce food for the population to feed the future. So how do we do that? What should be taken into consideration so that we produce enough food for everyone while preserving our environment and minimizing the resource utilization? So that brings me to the next point. For having such a framework, we would be looking, we are almost looking at two things. Firstly, feed to biomass ratio, where you're looking at how much inputs are you going to give in and how much outputs do you get out of it. Essentially, you are looking at 1:1 ratio, but that really doesn't come through most of the times. So what do we do to get more from less? How do we get more from less that we have? So how you need to make your system efficient, you need to increase the yield, you need to also increase the system performance. So are there any ways to do this? Can we do this naturally, like without depending on, some of these fertilizers or pesticides that promise to give, ready solutions and, very quick fix and solutions? Do we have some things which can help us? So yes, we do have these solutions and we don't have to look very far. It's just right there with the plants. So plants and microbiomes have associations from ages. They have these age-old intimate relationships that they share with each other. And this is very similar to what we have in our gut. I think all of you should be familiar with gut microbiome. I mean, that's something trending. So I would just introduce, you just take off the gut here and put a plant in the picture, and you'd be able to visualize what we are talking. And so these benefits that microbes give us, which I'll come in a bit, these benefits, because these microbes live with the plant, not only will they be nature derived, they would also be nature based. And at the same time, they would be non-GMO, which is the call for the hour. I mean, because everyone is talking about doing something which is non-synthetic and going right, green and natural. So this supports and it aligns very well here. And coming to the benefits of microbiomes. So how do these microbiomes work? How do they work with plant? So they mainly, I'll just give a very overview kind of overall thing, that they interface with the soil nutrients or any media that you put in. If you're using another farming format, and if it's not soil, it will still interface with the nutrients and the environment to allow for the nutrient maximization. So essentially you are looking at giving less inputs or less chemical inputs or fertilizers and getting maximum out of it. So that's one aspect of microbiomes. The others, which I've not covered here, are also on plant defenses and boosting plant responses, immune responses, and giving them an innate response to fight against pathogens and pests. So this is all that comes in the suite of what microbiomes can do for us. So now that I've introduced plant and microbiome and a bit about environment, I want to complete the equation. So if we are looking at having a sustainable food production, or looking towards practices which promote sustainable food production, we would have to carefully look at all the three elements here and we have to take them as a nexus, as a connection. So you have to look at plant and and environment, because they immediately react or respond to the environment stimuli. So it's very important to look at their associations. And at the same time, we also have to look at plant and microbiome associations, and to complete it, environment and microbiome associations. So it's a nexus where they all interact with each other. So within environment, what I'm talking here is air, water, and soil. And I don't have to say much here about air. Like if anyone had doubts that microbes live in air, yeah, they are in air, and you would know more about it now from the other things because now people are reading more on that, and we do understand that a lot of microbes that are there on plants are coming from air, also from water, also from soil. So this is the whole, and so we have to take them in totality and understand their intricate relationships. Firstly, the former relation, like the environment and plant, will help us in designing energy efficient systems, while the latter, plant and microbiome, will help us develop nature-based solutions. So you would be solving a lot of things in one go. So That's how we see it. And so when we talk about this nexus, the next thing that will come up, okay, now how do we exploit this nexus and develop certain next generation crop production strategies? So before I come to next generation crop strategies, I would spend some time on, what happened when we had these great famines long back, and how did we get to green revolution from then on. So we had these famines where we had a lot of food waste, and and there were a lot of deaths all over the world. Globally, people suffered due to due to hunger and food losses. We had an era of green revolution where the scientists produced a lot of high yielding varieties. We also got a handle on chemical fertilizers, so we got them all available, which could boost the plant growth immediately. And we also had mechanization, so we could bring in a lot of intensive farming practices, which gave a very big boost to the production that we had. So we could produce a lot. But then now we see that a lot of these chemical fertilizers have degraded the environment, and but our population is still growing, so we need to still feed more people. So and a lot of these farmers who were earlier there in this green revolution era have now left their occupations. So how do we go about it? How do we see the next generation green revolution happening? So the next generation green revolution would be fueled mainly by agricultural probiotics, which is what the microbiomes is. I'm just using a word which is more familiar to everyone. So because we would like to utilize or harness their services. And as I mentioned about environment, how do we bring that into pictures now that we have a lot of strategies available for automation and a lot of machine learning aids and AI technologies that are being available? We would be able to precisely control the environment, and we would also be able to engineer it to a certain extent to do what we would want to do. So to give an example here, let's say you want to control the light that is given to plant and give it only during a growth spurt period, which is where it is more required. You could do that. And so this is where we are looking at some of the next generation crop production strategies. And but these strategies would work with a framework where we would utilize and exploit the plant environment microbiome nexus. However, we also need to see here, if you look here, this part, the next generation green revolution, speaks a lot about cross disciplines. It is very multidisciplinary. Even from the look of it, you have engineering, you have machine learning, you have biology going, plant science going. So that brings to another bit, that what should be the elements of the framework to have this framework work, to get this framework to action. So one of the important things here is to integrate different disciplines and to cross-fertilize different ideas and perspectives coming from different sciences, and also to have automation, which I've already indicated in my past slide. Precise, we want our plants to become smart, to sense what's coming, going in and around them. So that's the level we are talking about. Also intuitive, which again comes as the smart farming. And of course, not to forget environment friendly. So I would spend some time here to talk about integration, because one of the key elements in our projects have been this integration concept and integrative knowledge that we generate by working in teams and working with several diverse stakeholders. And I would also like to highlight here that this framework should be based on natural associations, and it should also be backed by ecological theories for it to work, because these microbiomes, they live in natural associations, and we definitely cannot forget it for them to work. We have to give them this for it to work. And before I go to the approach, I'd also like to highlight here that although we talk about these next generation crop strategies, we should also not forget our local food security goals. So in all our projects, we've aligned our objectives to local food security goals. And just for everyone's knowledge, I mean, this is from SFA's website. So as you would all know, they're working in 3 food baskets. Most of our projects are centered in the second food basket, which is in grow local. So also aligns very well with the 30 by 30 vision that Singapore would like to be nutritionally self-sufficient by 30% by 2030. So we are working towards that. Most of our projects are looking into that area, and I'd introduce one of our projects in that. And also, of course, grow more from less sustainably. So one of our initiatives in this domain is on green leafy vegetables, because these are an integral part of Southeast Asian diet. Not to mention, they are packed with a lot of good nutrients, including antioxidants and human health benefits. So here, I would like to highlight how we have integrated different disciplines. So if you look from here, when you start from this side, this is, we call it SP1, but this is just theme 1. And this is mainly looking at crop production. So looking at the health of plants, the growth of plants, and the nutritional quality of plants. Then we move next towards the microbes that are associated with these plants. And then moving on, we go on to the agro technologies that will support the growth of these plants, which will be harboring these microbes. So we are going in a very stepwise and very like a feedback driven manner. And then we finally integrate it all together. So the outcomes and the knowledge that will be gained from each of these themes will be then integrated and put together as a solution that we would offer to our partner, because we are working with a farm partner here. So this is an example of an outcome based approach. That's how we would like to call it, because we work along with our farm partners, and we also are working with our food agency and health promotion board in reaching out to a wider community, and also with TLL, because they are one of our partners in one of the themes here. So before I go further into just explaining the technical side of our approach, I would spend some time on the integration part. So what are we looking at to achieve in this through the integration? We are looking at optimizing the microbiome. So basically looking at the best microbes that can boost the growth of the plants, increase the nutrient availability to reduce the chemical footprints, and also to increase or boost the resilience, plant resilience. So now that brings me to our approach. So we are mainly looking at theme 2, which is on the microbiome solutions. So I'll be sharing here approach today on how did we develop this, and what was the basis for it. And I would also share some of the resources that we have developed from this this approach. So we are taking, as I said, we are taking a very outcome-based approach. So we are working along with farmers, and we are delivering to farmers. So we start with the field and we end with the field also. So here we are trying to discover what's there. So it's a very, you can call it a survey in a larger sense, but it's essentially we are trying to see what's there. And here we are working with our commercial urban farm partner, with whom we are trying to see who are associated with these green leafy vegetables in terms of microbes, and what do they do, like what functions do they provide, because this is an urban environment. Singapore is an urban society. So we're looking at what do they do here, how do they support the plants, and there we are also looking at getting them back to lab and growing them. So isolate would just mean, in a layman language, getting them back to life in lab. And we are trying to see if can we bring the natural associations back to lab, because there are many labs or other enterprises who are working in this domain who would culture a single strain, but we are adopting a different approach. So we are trying to bring in the natural associations. So our culture approach is also based on that, which I'll come to it later. And then we are testing. We are simulating certain plant conditions to boost, to see the responses, that how do these microbes respond, and can we get them into consortia, and how do we apply them, and which stage should we go, and all these kind of things. And then the final being the field trial or test bedding, where we'll again bring the same thing that we discovered from here back to the farm. So essentially we are giving it back the entire technology. And so this is how, and in all the stages, we are working together with them. So if someone would want more details on what we have done so far in this, so there are these papers which people can refer to, and some other resources. And so I'll go a little bit for each of the steps, what we have so far. So first on who's there. So these are some of the pictures from the greenhouse of our urban partner, the farm partner. And so here you would see here we are measuring some water quality parameters. We are looking at some environmental parameters. Here we are harvesting some plants, taking the roots together to get the microbes out of the soil. And we're looking at seedlings, we're looking at adults. So we looked at a lot of things, and we looked at 3 green leafy vegetables, choisum, kailan, and bayam. And so what do we find? So we found, we built a database here, and we have a repository now where we have put out 910 microbial genomes, which we obtained from this farm. And this is the biggest resource that is known for crop-specific microbiomes so far. And what do we learn from here? We learn that these microbiomes have unique capabilities and unique functionalities, which can help in promoting plant production, especially catered for Singapore needs, because these are the microbes which were harvested from our soils, our Singapore soils. So then next, what did we do? We tried to find out what can these microbes do, and how do they compare with the microbes that we got from globally, or from the databases that we had, which publishes online repositories. What do we see from there? How do our microbes compare with theirs? And we found about more than 500 natural products that are there in these microbiomes, which are responsible for ensuring soil health and also promoting soil functioning. So it would essentially mean, if I translate it to more application-based thing, it would basically translate to low inputs. You giving low, for farmers, giving low inputs or adding less of the nutrients, because the microbes will give the capacity to soil to rejuvenate itself, to retain its natural conditioning by itself. So this is what it means. And of course, we also found some of these products to be involved in disease resistance, because a lot of them are antimicrobials, and also nutrient cycling I covered, and also for immune responses. And now coming to our how do they grow. So this is where I had mentioned about our novel approach, where we could get a lot of them into the natural consortia, like in pairs, in triplets, in quadruplets. So we could get them in all sorts of associations just by our novel isolation process or approach, where we used a combination of different media panels to get this consortia built. So here we are looking at, so I'm just capturing, this is just to rewind that we went from discovery to identification, now to culturing, and then next to the plant phase. I think this part of results we'll share in another platform. But just to mention here that we've also developed a repository to look at what are the genes from these microbial genomes that could benefit the plant directly, and how can we develop assays to test that in field, and how can we develop products that can suit different needs of the farmers. Let's say for growth, for looking at only growth and yield, and then looking at only, let's say, pathogen resistance or protection, and also looking at some of the climatic adversities, let's say drought resistance or some of the other things. Then now moving on to some of, I'm now kind of zooming out from the microbiome thing, and I'm now going into the overall thing, that what we have done as a whole program, what has been done so far. So we've also, so this is apart from the microbiome initiatives, we have filed 2 IPs for reducing the water chemical energy footprints. This is done by our team members in the project. And of course, from the knowledge base of our microbiomes, we are looking at enhancing the productivity and also nutritional quality. We are working here with the farmers, and we are working with the food agency here. So we are building and looking at establishing and fostering new partnerships. And we are also looking at going out in a wider community to translate some of this knowledge through dossiers and through some of the informative brochures and informative material, so that the farmers can adopt some of these management practices. Okay, that brings to end of my talk, but I think it would not be complete if we do not acknowledge our grantors who really believed in us and supported us in this journey throughout the program. also our host institute NERI, where this program is hosted, our entire lab management from NERI, and even the other admin management from NERI, who've always been extremely supportive, and they've always been there. Of course, all the research team members from this project, and all the lab members, sorry, I forgot to mention, but all our other lab members as well, because our lab is fairly big, and now it's almost to a group stage. So yeah, to all our lab members and our farming partners, collaborators, the food agency, national park boards, and all our academic collaborators. If you would want more updates, we would encourage you to follow our Twitter or Facebook page. You could also scan this and you would land onto our Twitter handle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shruti. It was a nice journey taking us through from a zoomed out food production global issues, which are extremely under threat. This is happening in the West, in the East, all parts of the world. So it's very pervasive. And so you touched on that. And of course, more relevant parts of the climate issues. In most countries, sustainability practices, uh, uh, but in more specific terms, bringing circularity. So those are coming up very clearly in your talk. So thank you. The technical session also reached out to providing what tool sets can be used and are being used, but in a local context, working with the farm, right? So kind of helps all of us to see the connection between what happens from the field, bringing things back to the lab, and then the outcomes going back to the field again. So that's a nice circular approach in the framework. So thank you once again. What I'll do is I'll see what questions are coming up in the Q&A section. We have one here. So that's on your contact. So if you can go back to your that slide, if you can just share it
Yes.
for a few seconds. Okay, so thanks for that. Um, so I had a question while others might be thinking. The question is from the point of industry and stakeholders who are not R&D based. What's the kind of timelines we talk about when we, let's say, hear a problem statement from a practitioner? And it's a very specific problem to something happening in their farm. I think most of the people, growers, would be interested in solving that particular problem, right?
Yeah.
So what would be a general advice to such a practitioner, and what kind of timelines or durations can we give them an idea?
Okay, thanks, Prof. So in terms of timeline, I think it would largely depend on the problem statement. Although, I mean, as a general guideline, uh, we would be looking somewhere around 6 months to a year if the problem is very specific. Let's say, to give an example, if they're looking at a pathogen attack in their farm and they're looking at some biocontrol agents, it could be somewhere from 6 months to, let's say, even under a year, because we would have to do in a stepwise manner. You take the product, we will have our product, but we would have to test try, do test bedding, and bring it to the field and see if it works. So from end to end, I would think that that is a good timeline. However, if the problem is complex, let's say, where they have more of secondary infection, apart from the main pathogen, they're looking at some other things, then I think then you would have to bring in, like, maybe even go to a seed fund stage where we have to do something together to solve it and know more about the farm. So that's how it would be. But it would be easier to work on the timeline if the process is more interactive for the practitioners. So if they come and discuss, and we have a lot of sessions together where we can understand more about them, we can also give them solutions which are more specific for their problem.
Right. So that sounds promising for growers, because having long-term R&D projects is not really what might be on the mind of growers whose products are, I mean, agriculture and food products are generally low-priced items. So these kinds of short, up to a year, year and a half type of solution cycle seems promising. You also mentioned there might be other types of funding sources which can defray some of these R&D costs if there is some active, expenses involved in the R&D. So yeah, that is nice. In the meantime, another question has come up. This is in the chat. I'll read it out. What is the yield rate compared to normal way of farming? So I believe these are more compared to the microbial solutions. How much percentage increase can one expect? So you can shed some light if you have any
Yeah.
information in that.
So efforts are ongoing in this, especially to make comparisons, because now a lot of farmers have gone on to hybrid farming. So when we compare these yields, we have to keep in mind what is the format that the farmer is using. So that would be the benchmark first to see this comparison. However, for most of the solutions that we see, either on agrotechnology side or microbiome, we do see at least 10 to 15% of yield increase. I mean, that's where we are looking at least currently. But this is compared with the soil-based, because this project was hosted on a soil-based thing. But now we are moving towards more hybrid formats. So we'll sure have, I think, more details on this in the coming months or in future.
So one thing may I add is when you see, let's say, a 15% or whatever X percent increase, in terms for the farmers for their financials, right? It could be a bigger jump because at the same time you are reducing inputs, right? So fertilizers, pesticides, and such. And by doing that, your product can also demand higher price. So these are additional benefits that come beyond the yield. The bottom line profitability for the consumer, the bottom line good health promotion, less chemical and pesticide, there's no question of residues because they have not been used. So those are the additional aspects that one can consider from a practitioner point of view. Yeah. So nice question, and thanks for that answer. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else is coming up. So we have a few more coming up. So I'll read the question, which is on, are there comparative studies from soil ecosystems across geographies in your genetic benchmarking database, right? So are there comparative studies from other soil systems across the globe in your genetic benchmarking database? Also interested in knowing if there is any waste breakdown patterns coming out of the study. So are there microbes, for example, that can break down certain types of waste, these which might be occurring in the soils? So if you can answer these two parts.
Okay, so I'll first answer the second part. So just interestingly, from our own culture collection, we have a microbe which has a potential of waste valorization, and we've also published it. Maybe I'll share it later with everyone, that paper, so they could go through it. It was just recently published. And so there we were very intrigued to see that it had a lot of enzymatic capabilities to digest a lot different types of substrates that you would commonly find in food waste. So very versatile type of strain that we found. So that's the second. But we did not really scan it for the other microbiomes, like from the other from global this thing that was beyond the scope. So we have not done that. But I think it's a good thing to do to benchmark it. And going to your first question, yes, we do have such things available. Maybe the database information that I shared there, we do not have a lot of soil ecosystems because that was more done for crops. But we have other ongoing projects where we are doing that also. So yes, we do have a resource as a group.
Yeah, thank you for the question and for responding. That waste valorization, if you think about it in the soil, a lot of things are accumulating and a lot of things are turning over. So in recycling naturally within the soil, these microbes we pick up. So that was good that you brought up this point. Thanks. I move to the next question, which is on what type of crop or crops you mostly target first to study in this context. That's an interesting question. Um, so I believe in an urban farming context, right? You mentioned you're starting with the Singapore context of the study. So what type of crop systems can one target?
Yeah, I think we would have to look at 2 to 3 aspects here. Firstly, what's we have to link to the consumer and see what's being consumed routinely and what forms the integral diet, and also looking at some of the policies that come up from that particular government, where they come up with guidelines on healthy plate or what should constitute a healthy plate. So a good place to start off with will be somewhere like that, and also something that most farmers are comfortable with, and at least you have a widespread so that you have somewhere to validate your findings. I mean, if you choose a crop which like not many are growing, or it's not possible to grow in a particular climate, you won't be able to satisfy anyone. At least you won't be able to validate in real settings. And so that's why we started off with green leafy vegetables, because we do know they are source of dense nutrients, and they are on our healthy plate also from Singapore. And now we are moving in our other upcoming projects, we are moving now further to other crop plants, which we are more, because now we are more kind of, we know how these vegetables work. So we are now moving to some other terrains which are more, may not be short cycle crops. These are short cycle. So we started off with them, and now we are moving to certain other type of crops with other nutrient benefits or attributes.
Yeah. So there can be from the leafy vegetable types that's based on the current plate, right? The food plate. One can also see it from a larger perspective, which is on food security and nutritional security. So in tropics, we have a huge diversity of food types, which originate from many different plant types. And these have not really been tested out in the urban indoor farm systems or farming systems. So that's another way to look at it in introducing, testing the palette and introducing based on the nutritional offerings of these other species for providing a diverse array and thereby reducing the risk when we think about food and nutritional security. Yeah, so that's another very good example of the type of targets one can choose. I move on to the next question. Thank you for sharing with us the interesting talk. May I know how feasible or effective of applying microbiome or biostimulants in the farm conditions?
I think it will depend upon how you go about developing your plan. So that's where our approach comes in, where I mentioned that we started off with the farm, or with the local conditions rather, and we go back to the local conditions. So since we got them from the local conditions or from local soils, we would expect them to work in the natural conditions. And I mean, not really only in Singapore, but also, of course, in other similar climates also, it's bound to work. So that's one reason. Second aspect here is to look at natural associations. So if we are able to capture natural associations and give something which is already in there in the system, so you don't introduce any alien elements, then it is bound to work better. rather than you getting something off the shelf somewhere which is there and you try it, it may or may not work. So that's the way to go for these, at least for the microbiome based solutions.
Yeah. So the benefit, if I may just add to the points that another perspective of what Dr. Shruti mentioned is that if you're starting from the native soil systems and you are biostimulating or ameliorating the local soil systems again, these effect of foreign microbes is not there. The risks are not there, right? So you have minimized that risk. If they are already in a consortium, so they will also, and this is one of the aspects of R&D system that Dr. Shruti was talking about, ecologically, how will the stimulants integrate with the resident flora? So mostly the commercial products off the shelf, some consortium or solution, there are so many of them available. But what's not known is in a given scenario, how these added external agents will compete with the resident flora. And in almost all the cases, and that's why commercially till now, when the ecologically inspired solutions were not there, what you put in gets outcompeted, then you put it again, then you put it again. So again, it's not good for either the farm or the farmer, that farm as in the soil system, or the farmer based on increased inputs. You're relying on a lot of inputs commercially. So it's better to have ecologically well stabilized products which have been derived from the community information of the microbial species. And then when you put back things, they become rather stable. So that would be an added advantage, right? So yeah, so it is feasible, it is effective, and the long-term effects, at this point, I don't think we have a ready answer because it's not been applied long-term. But in an urban farm where you are cycling your substrates and matrices on which you grow your plants, that's being cycled or recycled a few times. So that's the context, I guess, in which we'll be testing. But at this point, I don't think that part of information is there. So it's a gap in our knowledge. Yeah. So thanks for that question. We move to the next question. Um, this one says, very interesting work shared. Thanks for your insights. I'm keen to know, how do you ensure the effectiveness of your solution across different soil makeups at farms? So different farms will have different types of soil systems. So how transferable are these microbial solutions from one soil to other soil type?
Okay, so I'll just answer the question in two parts. So in terms of framework or approach, we could still bring along the same approach that I had shared. That's why we call it a generalized approach. So the approach in itself will remain the same. The way we would have to tweak some of the things inside. I mean, the discovery part or all the parts that we just said would all remain the same. But during the test bedding or the second last step where we are trying to see the plant or pot experiments, we'll have to tweak and we'll have to then account for the different farming formats. So we can bring that there and we would still be able to utilize it. So the approach stays as generalized as possible with few tweaks to suit the different farming formats. And the question on how to bring those same microbiome, if you're talking about how to bring the same microbiome members, which are there, which we found in a soil format to a different format, for that also there are different ways. So let's say if we find that they are not native for the other farming format that we are looking at, we could use some certain offline methods to still extract the services from them and then give it in the system, in the circulation. Let's say if it is hydroponic or any other substrate-based system. So that's still doable. If let's say we find that this is not the native microbiome and it may not be able to go well with the farming conditions. So that's another way. Maybe Prof, you can add something here.
So it's very true. The generalized approach is general enough, so it can cut short the time from discovery to actually providing the solution once it has been developed, and we are fairly mature in that stage because of this program. In terms of the solution, there is a lot of not just our work, but also learning from the works of other people, because this is a very hot area of crop microbiomes and finding these nature-based solutions. So a lot of information is now supporting the idea that if, let's say, you have crop systems within one family, right, a botanical family, let's say Kailan, Choisam, some of these brassica leafy vegetables. So microbes from one crop system, which are perhaps growing in a tropical system, the solutions would be very, very transferable. And that's a very systematic studies, very deeply research studies have shown that. So that's one level of understanding that, say, microbes for the gramineous or cereal crops might not be that suitable for these leafy vegetable dicots, but within the family at least, there will be transferability. Second is in terms of the soil systems. The soil systems, if they are within a certain range, let's say Singapore soil systems would be of a certain range, within a certain range, there will be farm to farm variations. But more or less, there is a movement of microbes across the soil systems because of the groundwater, because of the rain. Once the microbes are there in one place, they will also end up being in a certain environment. So let's say farms in the Lim Chu Kang agro technology park that's coming up, you would find these solutions to be rather transferable, right? So that would be another way to look at. We can also look at other aspects, bringing microbes across the countries or consortia. So that will need to be tested, and safety standards have to be done before they can be put into these outdoor farms. But for indoor farms, this is a very safe and sound approach. So as there should not be so much of a issue in controlling these microbes, right? So they are in fact nature-based solutions. So these are not pathogens. Hopefully that shares some insight into the questions that you all had. We have a little bit more time left. So I want to ask something related to the urban farms, right? The nature of farming has changed, right? Our palate has changed. Now the young urbanites are eating more salads. We know salad bars and salad lunches, they're becoming more adoptable. At the same time, high protein plant-based diets are also coming up. A lot of industries have come up on plant-based diets. So can urban farming be extended beyond meeting the fresh salads, which the current first wave is addressing, to these other protein-based, plant-based diets that are used for a broader range of consumers, right? So could that be a second wave? What do you see coming from the food nutrition point, also now heavily engaged in food production side? Where do you see this role for the food product, for the plant-based diet story?
Yeah, I think, Prof, that's a very good point, which I wanted to touch in my presentation, but I somehow missed it, that we also have another thing going on dietary preferences and changing palates, which are becoming more globalized, because you can have anything on your plate now coming to you within your doorsteps. So people are becoming more experimentative, and also there is a heightened interest in social causes, and being eating more environment friendly or being more conscious. So going by that, yes, we would have to move forward and look forward to develop or to uh, have more technologies in place to produce different types of crops in terms of their textures, flavors, to suit everyone's palates, and at the same time also meet the nutritional needs. However, current vertical market, at least the vertical farming market that I see globally, most of them are still into the green leafy vegetables. However, they've now started and into hybrid formats where they use some other technologies along with vertical farming to raise some other kind of varieties like tomatoes or strawberries. So this is right now that phase happening. So I would think that maybe soon we would transition and go to another phase where we might be able to look at some of the staples or at least starches. Let's say starches, not really like our staple like wheat, rice, but starches which are more feasible in certain formats. I've also seen some of the things that keep coming or flashing in lot of these interactive forums where people are talking about it and people are experimenting in their homes. At least in home style, I see people doing certain things. So I'm sure it will come to the commercial side. It's just about when.
Right. Uh, yeah, so you touched upon home, right? And that brings up, um, uh, let me see the time available, 9 minutes. So just very quickly, there is a lot of interest in home-based agri-production, right? At least for home consumption. On one hand, it is good. You have a control on what you want to grow, how you grow. There are several commercial options available, growth formats available for home growing. At the same time, it poses a risk of quality of the produce, right? So sometimes if they are not watchful, some pathogen attack, if that happens, or if insects start vectoring or bringing foreign pathogens in, sometimes at home, because they might not have that expertise or the eye to catch the infections, then the quality of the food product could get affected. So could there be some ready solutions or some cautions or how to go about de-risking at the same time increasing your homegrown produce?
Here, Prof, I'll take this opportunity to highlight that we have a very active network of these urban farming enthusiasts. They are on Facebook and they have a very active channel, and we have other platforms also where they're active, especially where they conduct these community workshops. And these some of them are social influencers in the community who work with the community members to look at how people can have home garden or have an indoor gardening facility, and also looking at the nurseries which are there in HDB blocks. So these kind of platforms and sources are available. So I would encourage anyone and everyone who's interested to do that to see some of those resources and see where can they get their items or where can they start. They provide all the way from the starter kit all the way to the troubleshooting solutions, like let's say flies. That's a very common thing that I hear from people, that these attracts flies and mosquitoes, their indoor plants. So what should we do, or what kind of indoor plants are suitable for bringing in? So all those kind of resources are already available, at least for our local community here. So that's, I think, called Smart Local Farmer Community, and that's there on Facebook and even on Twitter and other platforms. So maybe people could see more about that, how to go, because I think these are all tried and tested solutions by the people, which is suitable for our indoor environments.
Right. So thank you, Dr. Shruti. This session covered from the global situation to the local food situation to the home growing situations or formats. It was quite comprehensive, and hopefully people have taken down some contacts or context of the information. So if you want further information, you can reach out. If you haven't been able to write down the contact, you can still reach out to NERI, which is the host for these webinars, and we will be hosting a number of very exciting number of webinars coming up. So you can write to us. You can log in same time tomorrow, 4 p.m. Singapore time, local, for yet another one, again, on the theme of urban food production and focusing on some circularity and how to make this food production more safe and stable for the consumers, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your presence. This was a full hour full of information and very interactive. So thank you for all your participation. And we'll see you tomorrow. For those who are interested in tomorrow's topic, there's a whole list available. Do go to the website and see. Thanks again, and bye-bye.